Hey everyone, I'm Jeremy Kraybill. I'm the entrepreneur in residence at MAP, and what does that mean? Well, I'm a volunteer. I started working with the MAP team pretty close to the beginning, about in the first year, and I've donated a small amount of my time over the years to the program as a mentor and on the selection committee, and had the opportunity this year to get more involved. And what that means as entrepreneur in residence is that I live with the MAP team. I run my business out of the MAP office, and I give more time than I have in the past to the program. And during the program, what that means is that I'll be available to all of the members of the MAP team. I make myself available to all of you in the lead up to the application process if you'd like feedback on your pitch, as well as giving sessions like this. So, MAP, I guess most people went to the info night the other night. Applications are now open, and what we're talking about is the deadline for the paper applications of 17th of April. So you have time between now and then to not only improve your pitch, but also improve the traction that you have as a business. We talk to a lot of people who at this stage, they're sort of asking what traction is, and there's a lot of different ways to define traction, and I'll get to some of those, but you have an opportunity between now and the 17th of April. Every single person, no matter what you're doing, you can improve the traction of your pitch and of your business, which will improve your business even if you're not pitching to MAP. A couple other points. So I'm really excited. I think this news sort of went under the radar, but as I think a lot of you know, previously MAP had a requirement of 5-year alumni and staff of our qualifying faculties, and we have dropped that requirement. It was very late news in the lead up to the application process, but we're really excited about that. We're really excited to have a lot of people in the room who probably weren't eligible in the past. In fact, I'd sort of like a show of hands. How many of you, this is the first year you became eligible because of the 5-year requirement being dropped? So we've got a bunch of people. We're still trying to get the word out on this. This was under the radar news, and it came right at the last minute because of our approval process, unfortunately. So if you can do us a favor and just let people know, there's a lot of people out there who I think who are still associating MAP with the 5-year requirement. The other piece of information that we would like your assistance with is we have noticed that I think part of it is because of these terms like entrepreneur and startup. I spoke for a while at the info night about one of the great things about MAP compared to the average commercial accelerator is that we don't take equity in your business, and we do not solely measure our success as a program on financial returns. And so what that means is we have the freedom that a lot of commercial incubators and accelerators do not have, in that we have a much more open-minded idea and a broader definition of what the total return of this program is to the university, to Melbourne, and to Australia. And so what that means is the types of teams that we want to see. You may look at the list of the teams who have come into MAP in the past and surmise that this is a program for high-tech startups, traditional high-tech startups mostly. And that would be sort of reasonable based on the teams that have gotten in the past. The reason that we have that mix of teams is because that's who's applied to MAP in the past. And this term startup, we have a pretty broad definition of what that means. We are open and very encouraging of not-for-profits to apply, for social enterprises to apply, for weird and wacky businesses that wouldn't get the time of day in traditional venture capital to apply, for businesses that don't have a goal of becoming $1 billion business eventually. We are very encouraging of that. We would like to see much more of it. And so I'd like to ask for your help in getting the word out on that as well. Because it's something that is going to take time, and it's sort of a branding, and people think of startups and what they see out of Silicon Valley, and they have a very specific idea of what that is. And that's valid, but our idea of it is much broader. And that's a great thing for this program, and that's one of the reasons that I've become heavily involved in this program, is I really believe in what we are able to do and the freedom that we have as a non-commercial accelerator. And this is something that I think it's great that everyone in this room is able to take advantage of. even for the folks who don't get into the startup accelerator that we run at MAP, we are running more events than ever this year across a very wide variety of topics, and we want you to be involved. We love seeing people who didn't get in the past stay involved, apply again. We've had numerous people who have applied multiple years. We love seeing that. Quite a few of them have eventually gotten in, so don't be discouraged that you can't engage with MAP. Regardless of the outcome of the application process. Or even if you feel that you're not ready this year, we run a number of programs, pre-accelerator type programs, which you can find on our website, which prepare you for that. But let's get into why we're here. So this is our eligibility. I think most people are aware of this. So what this eligibility criteria means is at least one of your team needs to be a student, staff, or alumni of any time from these participating faculties of the University of Melbourne. And we took one big step in broadening the criteria this year. We'd love to see that broaden in the future as well. Just really basically an overview of the application process and the selection process. So where we are right now is you are preparing to submit an online application and video. Those applications close on the 17th of April. We encourage you to not wait till the very last minute to submit your application, because sometimes people have technical issues, or sometimes you might have a problem. We would encourage you to apply not right at the last minute, but there's some benefits to waiting because of your ability to develop your pitch, to get feedback on it, as well as to develop the traction of where you are as a project. Of that, we would expect, so last year we had approximately, 63 applications, something like that. This year it's probably going to be close to double than that, we hope, because we've expanded the scope of the applications. We then select of those online applications, which is a very simple form and a 3-minute video. We select people to come and pitch in person. And this will be some percentage of the folks who submit applications, probably somewhere between 20 to 50%, depending. We don't set quotas at any of these stages. So we're looking for people who are good, the pitches that we like and we think really have a shot. And as I mentioned at Info Night, we really look for teams that we believe we can assist during the program. So we believe that to be an important part of what we do is we're not looking for the absolute best businesses. We're looking for the best startup teams that we can assist the most during the scope of this program. So that's a little bit, again, different than what you see in some other commercial accelerators. After that, you will do your pitch. That is a 3-minute pitch. And then after that, we select of those pitches. Our mentors are in that room that night, and we make some selections. You're then brought into a MAP team interview. The people will make it to the next stage where you meet the team. This is a 45-minute interview, and there's no filter at that point. That is really just for the team to get to know you better. Everyone who makes it to that point will also make it to the selection panel, which is our selection panel of a handful of folks who have been around for a while and have been involved with the program and very experienced, asking you questions. You're going to do your pitch again, and we're going to have an interview of about 15 minutes. That's it. After that, we're going to make the decision on the 10 teams that get in this year. So, and then the induction 18th of May, launch party 25th of May. And as I mentioned, the show is not over there. If you didn't get in, please stay involved. So, application workshop, the purpose of this session is to help your pitch and help your chances of, maximizing your chances of getting in a MAP. And so when you talk about the basics of what would bring you to this room and what will bring you to apply to MAP, you're going to want to have an idea. It's not too late to even start from an idea. We've had quite a number of applicants who at this point are still sort of in ideation, but you have a lot of work to do between now and April 17th if you're going to make it through the process, because this is a competitive process and there are people who have been doing what they're doing for several years, several months, and have all different varieties of traction. But even if you didn't have an idea yet, that does not guarantee that you will not get in, and we want to hear from everyone. So, and then a team. So a team is not required. I think there was a question at Info Night that indicated that maybe the word team on the website can be confusing to people. We are absolutely open to solo founders. So if you are a solo person on a project, there's no requirement to have a team. You are a team of one, is how we view it. Your team is an important part of your pitch, and conveying who those people are in a small amount of time, because you only have 3 minutes total, is a very important part of the pitch. And we want to hear who you are and sort of why, what the connection is between who you are and what you're doing in this pitch. And then finally, do you want to do MAP? So MAP is not for everybody. And if you think it's not for you, then I would encourage you to not apply, because you can talk to past teams, you can figure out, hey, this actually isn't really what we need right now, but we can point you in a lot of different directions, whether it's you think you're too early or too late, or you just think that this is not the type of program that you really want to benefit from. There's a lot of other programs out there that we've got resources to connect you with. All right, so we've sort of talked about that. I want to emphasize that this application process is about the pitch, and that's good and bad. I think at times can feel like a pitching competition, but we as a selection panel really believe that this 3-minute pitch format it's ultimately a compromise, right? But we believe that it is a very strong indicator of who will be good and who will benefit from MAP, and the best teams will make it through. And there are a lot of things you can say about the pros and cons of a pitching process, but that's what this is, for better or for worse. And so the way that you need to think about getting into MAP is optimizing your pitch to present what you're doing in the most accurate and best light. So if your pitch is inaccurate in any way, that is a complete deal breaker. So that's not what I'm talking about. We're talking about being very clear and telling us what you're doing and telling us how MAP is going to benefit you, where you're going to next. Correct. I don't know why that says that. These slides, I wrote them a couple years ago, and I just haven't edited them probably. So pitch night, there's no questions, 3-minute pitch. So you're gonna do your pitch in an online video. Your online video doesn't have to be the pitch, but I think it helps some people. But I wanna emphasize also in this process, we want you to be very individual. We don't want to, seeing pitches that feel like they came off the Guy Kawasaki pitch mill is not what we're looking for. We're looking for unique pitches that convey who you are. And then selection interview, which is the pitch with an audience. So what we're talking about tonight is very much what is a good pitch and how do you come up with one. So this is my preferred format. Like I say, these are guidelines. You don't have to copy this and do it in order, but these are the things that I need to hear from your pitch. Who am I speaking with is the first one. Introduce yourself at the beginning of your pitch. I would consider that to be near mandatory. I want a 1 or 2 sentence elevator pitch on what you're doing. So a lot of different ways to describe that, but I want to know right up front, just in a very small nutshell, what you are. I want to hear who your team is. This can really be anywhere. I think you do really want to have a slide on team. You want to speak about your team. So I think the team slide, what I want to hear, and again, team, all of this information, you want to convey it in a very information-dense way. You only have 2 minutes and 45 seconds is sort of where you should plan your pitch probably. So you need to be very judicious about what you're telling me and what you're not telling me. When you're talking about team, I want to hear, I think the ideal team slide is 1 sentence on each team member, or even a couple words that convince me that these people are connected to what they're doing, and hopefully what you're telling me about yourself encourages me that you can do it. So, but that's not always the case. If you've got relevant experience, just saying, if you're doing let's say you're doing an entertainment online movie thing, and you say, this is founder A, was a manager at Netflix for 2 years. That's all I need to hear, that's enough. Don't tell me anything more, that's it. If you are students, I still want to hear your connection and your role within the team. This is founder A, excellent developer, just graduated in computer science, whatever that is. And so what we're looking for is the connection and ability to execute. Traction. So traction is probably the most important part of your pitch. It is telling us where you're at. That's what traction means. Where are you at as a project? Where are you at as a company or a business or not-for-profit? And no matter where you are in the continuum, you should have something to say about that. So I want to know absolutely all accomplishments that are relevant and that can be summarized easily. So if you're sort of later stage compared to the companies that we see, we are talking about things like last year we did $150,000 in sales. If you are, we won some competition. If you are earlier stage, there's still many ways to gain traction and talk about traction. One of the things that I really, if folks in this room don't know what the sort of Steve Blank lean startup customer development methodology is, you need to go and learn what that is and incorporate that into what you're doing as a business. You don't need to do this for your pitch. You don't need to do this to get into MAP. You need to do this because it is for almost all types of teams that we see coming into MAP, it is the best way, if you read and apply that information, to develop an idea and develop a product and develop a customer base. I have already spoken to at least 10 people who intend to apply to MAP who believe that if you build it, they will come and are doing field of dream style product development, and they haven't talked to a single customer. Don't do that. Do not do that. So, and how does that apply to traction? Well, that's a good question. So, we want to know where you are in customer development. So even if you're very early stage, like just an idea, we want to see, is that idea validated? Who are the people that you've spoken to? What are they saying? And what have you learned from that? That is more important than where the product is at. And if you're dealing with, for instance, things like web products and websites, it's fine to show us a picture of it in your pitch. No one's ever gotten in or not gotten into MAP because of a picture. And what we care about much more than the visual state of your product, and visual state can be informative, especially if you're dealing with like physical things. It's cool to bring something along and show it. That's cool and it's good. But what we care about much more is sort of where are you traction-wise, which really doesn't have a whole lot to do with product development, has a lot more to do with customer development. So that's traction. I feel like we're probably going to get a lot of questions about traction, and that's fine. We always do because it's sort of a loaded term. You do not have to have sold anything to get into MAP. In fact, I would say the majority of our teams probably at the point they got into MAP had not sold anything. So this is not what we're talking about with traction, but we are talking about tangible activities. So now, who your team is and is traction, I think in the typical pitch is actually later in the pitch. This is what you need to cover, not sort of when to cover it. There's a lot of writing on that. Again, try not to sound like you're from the pitch mill, be individual, and convey your story in the most effective way for what that story is. And that varies from person to person and team to team. So, problem statement. Usually the first thing that people talk about after like the elevator pitch and maybe your team. So what the problem is, and I think I talk about style in a moment, but it's very important to speak English when you are pitching. Like speak normal conversational English. So avoid any sort of technical jargon, stuff like that. Your problem statement should be like a couple sentences that are obviously understandable, regardless of what you're doing. Even we've seen some very technical, like biotech, DNA type startups and stuff like that apply. And even no matter what your idea is, you can state it in a way that everybody in the room will understand it. And every part of your pitch should be something that every person in the room can understand, no matter what you're doing. So the problem that you're solving, how you're solving it, why you're solving it, how you found the problem, very important things to talk about. Again, you've got limited airtime, and I wouldn't be spending a whole lot of time on this. And try to relate it to real life if you can. Some things are a little abstract, but that helps. Market sizing. is I would say after traction is market sizing, and there's two things with market sizing that we're looking for. It's what is the scale size of this opportunity? Again, because we don't optimize for financial returns, we're not trying to maximize. We don't care. We don't have a bar. You don't have to be $1 billion addressable market. We don't care about that. We just want to know what the size of the problem is that we're talking about, and where you would be if you were number one for that, as sort of just a benchmark. And this market sizing, this applies even if you're a not-for-profit, even if you are a social enterprise and your goal is not like market domination, you still have a market, which is the people that you will serve, the problems that you're addressing. We want the sizing for those sorts of things. And so the other thing that you convey when you talk about market size is that you know your market. And a significant number of our applicants do not understand their market and haven't even done like 30 minutes of Google research to understand the market. If you haven't done this, you need to do this, and you need to understand your market, and you need to be accurate in how you think about it and how you size it. We see some other common problems with market sizing. So, when you read online, the online literature about pitching and about how to pitch and lean startup, there's some certain terms that are used that things like SAM and TAM and SOM, and I do not like hearing those terms in a pitch because they're not normal English and they're not how people speak. So I don't want to hear them. Some people feel differently. It's just not what I want to see. I want you to describe your market in normal English and in a way that's accurate and that shows that you understand it. So with that, there are some other problems that we see. We do want you to understand the concepts that I just mentioned, things like total addressable market. And we want you to apply that when you talk about market sizing in a way that reflects that you understand what addressable market is. So let me give you an example. I'll make one up. So if you're producing a specialty light fixture that is a luxury light fixture that goes into wealthy people's homes and is fancy and maybe it's branding related, do not tell me what the total size of the furniture market is, because that is not your addressable market. And this is something that a lot of people do. You can start with that, and the types of things that I would be interested in hearing that are exciting is if you said something like, well, the Australian furniture and fixtures market is $3 billion per year, the global is $300 billion, I'm making these numbers up, don't check them, is 300, 25% of that is light fixtures, but what we found that's interesting is that luxury light fixtures are currently only $50 million a year, but they're growing year over year at 30%. So don't use that as a template for what you think about market sizing, but what that has just conveyed to me is that you understand where you sit in the market, you know that there's an opportunity here because you've identified a little growth niche. Hey guys, feel free to move in. We got tons of seats. You don't have to stand back there if you don't want to. You're allowed to, but we've got tons of seats. So come on down. But what I'm saying with this is that you really need to understand who's really going to buy your product or use your product and who these people really are and have a realistic idea of that. The other thing that quite a few people still do that also conveys to me that you have not done basic research on what a good pitch is that you say something like, luxury light fixtures are $1 billion a year industry, and therefore if we got 1% of them, we would be doing $10 million a year, right? So you need to have a more practical approach to how you are thinking about the market and how you're attacking the market. So it's not always relevant, but we want to hear tangible plans if you have them on sort of how you're going to hit distribution and scale. Just having a big market isn't enough if it's not clear that all these people actually could be customers or ever would be. And we like to hear more realistic stuff. I think there's also going to be a bunch of questions about this, and I would encourage you to give those to us because, I think we can be a little bit close to the problem in terms of like the gap between some people's experience and understanding and what we see coming across. Huge variety in the pitches we see in approaching market size and ability to size the market. So we encourage tons of diversity in how you think about your market and the size of the market. We do not encourage you to not know your market. So this is important. It's an important distinction. Solution. So you've talked about the opportunity or the problem. You've talked about what you're doing to, the sort of size of the opportunity. And so now we want to know about what you're doing to address that, sort of what your solution is. I think most people don't really have a problem with understanding this concept. So the one thing that pretty much every pitch can do is at least tell us what you're doing and what your product does. However, we want to hear some other things that we don't always see. So something about not necessarily competition, it depends on what you're doing, but we want to know who else is in this space. And saying that you have no competitors is extremely rarely true because there is always, if it is true, it may not be a good thing because it may actually show that there isn't really a problem here that needs to be addressed. But you need to think about what else is in the space and what is a competitor as a much more broad question if you have arrived at the conclusion that you have no competitors. So if you're doing something that isn't currently done today, you're trying to address some problem. However people solve that problem today is your competitor. And that might be our competitor is like, they're misusing some other product or they're overloading it or Coca-Cola had a big shift in strategy where they stopped thinking about their competition as Pepsi and they started thinking of it as water and coffee. So it's sort of that mindset shift that we're talking about. It's good to talk about who else is doing what you're doing and what you're displacing is sort of part of what we want to know. And it also reflects that you understand the market. So we have had too many teams in the past come in and say that they are the first person to do something. And I have Googled it in the selection interview and have gotten a full first page of people who are doing exactly the same thing. So don't make that mistake, but you need to know what you're doing and what your market is. Why are you better? Depends on what you're doing, how relevant that is, but we do want to know what is sort of like if you've got a bunch of solutions or products or services in your area that are already doing something similar, we do want to know what sets you apart. I think that people tend to overvalue kind of product competitive advantage more than execution competitive advantage. So, I think it's good to have barriers to entry and competitive differentiation, but there are a lot of businesses that really don't heavily rely on that. They see an execution or distribution opportunity and they're using that. So again, this totally depends on what you are doing, but you want to incorporate what this is telling us, this part of the pitch is, yes, you know what you're doing. Yes, there's something here in terms of an opportunity. Yes, you are able to address it and have a plan. And also, the extent to which we believe you could be successful can depend on these factors as well. So those are all things that we're looking for. How will you make money? It's in caps. It's not a requirement. What is a requirement is what your model might be. And no matter what you are doing, you should be able to tell us what's the sustainability and scalability model of what you're doing. So this is actually not about how will you make money. It's about how will this thing grow and what is your plan. So a lot of people, I think, and this is also not always necessary, It's fine to be working on a project that sort of has the early Twitter, Facebook business model. We don't know yet, but we think that we'll be able to gather a whole ton of people. If you are doing that and you expect to be successful and you think that that answer will eventually be advertising related, that group of people that you're trying to aggregate better be super huge, because advertising in that sort of like any business where you're just trying to hit scale of users, no one pays you anything except your advertisers, very, very difficult to make work if the numbers aren't giant. So we don't see a whole lot of those businesses anymore. I think that there's still a lot of opportunity out there, and we don't discourage those types of business. I think there's lots of good ideas. They are very hard and expensive to make work. It's very rare for any of them to work without raising tons of money, so just things to bear in mind. We want to know how MAP will help you, and you don't necessarily have to tell us that. What we want, it's very important to us in the selection process that we are selecting teams that we believe will greatly benefit from the MAP experience. And what that means in practice is very personal to individual teams. We've had teams of all sorts of plans, all sorts of time scales. We've had some like pharmaceutical pilot type people. If their product works, it's going to take 10 years. So this isn't about, we're going to kill the world in 5 months. This is about what can MAP do for your team in the time span that we have. And we want to make sure that this is a mutually beneficial relationship. And so this also, something else that we look for is we really look for teams that we believe can have a lasting effect and a lasting benefit to the nascent but growing ecosystem that we are helping to develop in Melbourne. And so a big part of that is we want you to be successful at the end of the program. You don't have to be. You're not going to be whipped like some commercial accelerators will whip you if you are showing signs of not coming out the end with certain numbers that we want you to hit. We don't have anything like that. In fact, we've had a number of teams that during the program, before the program was even over, killed their original idea or project, started a new one, or dramatically changed what they were doing. And that's encouraged. We want you to fail fast. We don't want anyone wasting time because they feel like they're on a treadmill. This isn't what MAP is about. And that's how we sort of look at the mutually beneficial aspect of MAP. And like I said, it takes very different forms. I don't necessarily, and I would actually sort of, if you think that your pitch can convey this without actually talking about it, that's great because it allows you to use your airtime on other topics. But this is an important thing that we look for in the teams that come in. Say thank you at the end. Do not go over time. We are extremely strict on time. You will be buzzed at 3 minutes and sort of Kane style taken off stage. So make sure that you do not go over time. I would recommend practicing your pitch for 2 minutes and 45 seconds to target that as your length. But whatever works for you, different people have different speaking styles, whatever. All right, so things that will make your pitch better. You need to watch 100 pitches. If you haven't watched 100 pitches, you're not going to know what a good pitch looks like. Watch 100 pitches. There's thousands and thousands of them online. These slides are online. They got some recommendations. You should watch a lot of pitches and take notes on what made them good and what made them bad and what you think could be incorporated into your pitch to improve it. Again, we don't want a pitch mill. We want you to, in a unique and individual way, convey what you are doing that is unique and individual. All right, style stuff. This is my opinion, and these are not really even recommendations. These are the things that I think stylistically improve a pitch. They don't work for everyone because these are very personal things, and not everyone, for instance, is enthusiastic or conveys it. So the things that I like stylistically in a pitch, I love enthusiasm because you should be enthusiastic about what you're doing, but different people convey this in different ways. I think it's just a universally useful attribute, and hopefully you're enthusiastic about what you're doing. I want to see your team. You're here applying for a program that hopefully will change your lives. And so if your team isn't present, I want to know why. And that's super quick. These are our two of our three founders. Unfortunately, our third one is currently pursuing his PhD in Cambodia, and he's defending his thesis tomorrow, whatever that is. So I want to hear if your team isn't in the room, but your team should be in the room. And again, stylistically, and different teams are different, and we've seen plenty of good multi-person pitches, but I believe in general that your best speaker of your team should present your entire pitch. Like I said, we've seen plenty of good multi-speaker pitches, but I believe in general, we see too many of them. And pitches that would be improved if it was just one person talking to me and the other folks standing at the front of the room when the pitch is being given. And it can also be a distraction. If you've got 4 people and you're trying to divvy up a 3-minute pitch, you are wasting some time and sort of wasting attention. When you're talking about things like business model and market size and product, you need to pick. If you've got options that you're really debating that are on the table, in this 3-minute pitch, you probably should pick one. You should, and it's totally fine to say, we actually aren't sure what the business model is. We have a couple options. Right now, we think that the best option is selling it for $7.50 via, physical retail or whatever that is. What we don't want to see is, we think it's either going to be this where we're going to do this, or this where we're going to do this, or this where we're going to do this, because you've just wasted some time in your pitch, and it hasn't improved your pitch. It's actually made it look more like you really don't know what you're doing. And don't attack us with data. We see people who I think consciously or subconsciously are attempting to impress us or maybe confuse us with stuff that no one would understand if they don't spend 30 minutes looking at a single slide. And there's no pitch that is improved by that. I think I've talked enough about being knowledgeable about your market. Personal recommendation, I don't like weasel words, things that are non-specific that say, well, we think it's big, and that's sort of where you go. You want to be as specific as possible. And in speaking style, I know that a lot of you, this might be your first or biggest public speaking opportunity. I would strongly encourage you to not read from a fully written speech. Cue cards are fine, but speeches that are read word for word are much less effective at conveying information than actually having a conversation with your audience. So again, not everyone can do this, and don't do it if you think you're going to mess up. But it will help you as much as you can just get up there and deliver and talk to the audience and look them in the eye, that this will help your pitch. Video is not allowed. So don't avoid video. It is not allowed in a pitch. Do not show us video. It is not allowed. The reason it's not allowed is it doesn't improve pitches. That's basically why it's not allowed. And be brutal in editing and practicing your content. Practice it in front of as many people as you can. Get feedback. As I mentioned, I make myself personally available to any person who is applying to MAP to get, depending on how busy I am, anywhere from like 10 to 20 minutes of feedback on your pitch. As many times as you want throughout the application process. Don't take too much advantage of that. I'm a busy guy, but we give you resources. This is one of them. Getting feedback is another one of them. We want your pitches to be the best possible when you come in the door, and we want everyone to be on an equal footing in terms of the information that you have access to. So take advantage of these resources because they're there to help your chances of getting into MAP. And really, these activities help what you're doing as a business. Even if you think, I'm never going to talk to VCs, I'm never going to raise money. Going through the process of developing a pitch is a very helpful exercise, and it's something that you should do. Don't talk about other teams. I feel like I shouldn't say that. I don't have to say that, but it does happen. Just don't talk about other teams in your pitch. It's irrelevant. Content stuff, I'm sort of going over time, so I'm going to keep this brief. We've talked about competition. We've talked about show me the money. We've talked about know your market. We've talked about give me facts. I do want to emphasize that we're not looking, don't try to cram as much information as possible into 2 minutes and 45 seconds or 3 minutes, because that will also affect the quality of your speech. Cut down the facts. Be able to speak at a normal rate like you're having a conversation. These slides are available, will be available online, by the way, just in case anyone doesn't know that. And yeah, deck to speech ratio. I'm not personally a huge fan of the decks that are just photos. I think that's a little bit maybe played out, and you can do better than that. But I also don't like to see decks that are like tons of text. And again, this is something that you will ascertain if you watch a lot of pitches. That will help you. Sort of what your deck should look like. And stylistically, we have a huge gamut of quality, visual quality in the decks. I don't think this is super important. There are certain types of companies where this is super important, because if you're trying to be an online branding or marketing agency and you can't develop a good looking presentation deck, like that's probably an indicator that maybe you're in the wrong space. But we do want to see, the material that you're presenting and what you're telling us to be as good as possible, and that takes a lot of different forms. So again, watching a lot of pitches, I think will educate you on that. I think I've talked about this as well. These are sort of the things, some of the attributes that I believe that awesome teams have. So they know the problem, especially if they've worked on it or they've experienced the problem themselves. They know the solution. They are able to at least convince us that it's viable and that they can do it. They have a great team. We really, I think, a big part of our selection process, more so than traditional commercial accelerators, is the people. That we have teams where sort of the balance of what we're weighing when we're looking at you, like having an awesome team can accommodate or can help to address having like a less than optimal idea or pitch even. If we really believe in you as startup people who are going to be great for this program and are going to figure it out, even if what you're doing right now isn't that great, that's a very good thing. I say need the money here, but I've actually I think I've addressed this. It's not need the money. It's will clearly benefit from the map experience. So this is something that we really look for in team. I've demonstrated that. I've talked about traction, and people are having a good time. Like, we want everyone to have a good time. Starting a company, a project, working long hours sometimes, it's not always a good time, but we're here to try to make this a good time. And it's something I really care about because I spend a lot of time in the office now since moving in, and so this is a personal space for me personally, and I want everyone in that office to be comfortable and having as good a time as possible. So something that's really important to me personally, and that I hope to be able to really bring to this intake. This is the first intake that I'm going to be living out of the office during the intake. Bad things, like I think I've again spoken about most of these. Having one founder. So having one founder, as I mentioned, is not a problem, but it does introduce some potential problems that we think about as a selection panel. So as a sole founder, you are a single point of failure. As a sole founder, you have a lack of diversity of opinion within your group, even compared to a two-person founding team, of how to do things, what you're doing, are you doing the right thing? And so these are potential obstacles that we think about when looking at single founders and sole founders. Do they have the tools to overcome those obstacles? Do they have a plan? I mean, maybe your plan is just, hey, actually, I am a sole founder right now, but my absolute first priority is adding this person to the team. That's fine as well. Not a requirement. There's other ways that we look at it, and we have absolutely let in multiple sole founders in the past. It is something to think about in your pitch if you're a sole founder. Pursuing a bad market, one of the issues that we see, especially with first-time founders who just graduated from undergrad at Melbourne Uni, is you've come up with this idea by sort of looking around and you don't have a whole lot of experience, and so you've come up with a hyper-local, too local idea that's too specific to university students that isn't really addressing a real problem because it's just what you saw when you looked out the window. And you need to broaden. Now, those aren't always bad ideas, just sometimes they're too local. And I think this applies to, the vast majority of pitches that we see are too narrow or short-minded in terms of ambition, where you can go with it and where you want to take it. We see a lot of pitches that are pitching about an Australian business when they should be pitching about a global business. We see a lot of pitches that are talking about a Melbourne business when they should be talking about an Australian business. We see a lot of businesses, a lot of pitches that are talking about doing something around university students when really this is a problem that all people have or some segment of people. I spoke to someone, I think they pitched once, who had an idea for Malaysian student grocery delivery to University of Melbourne students. But when you speak to this person, they have identified a real problem that obviously applies to a much wider segment of non-English speaking recent immigrants to Australia who have like a grocery, or it's actually a thing delivery need, a thing purchasing need. So even that, which is laughable, you laughed, right? But there's something there. So all of your ideas, when you're talking about ideation, this is not an ideation workshop, but try to stretch them, try to expand them, try to make them more ambitious, and think about where, if this is really successful, where it could go, because almost everyone aims too low. And if you don't aim high, you're not going to get there. So again, it's not a requirement. It's just most pitches, I think, and the way that people think about their businesses could be more ambitious.